never planned to live long. Seriously, life is just too exhausting. My face, my life. What's left to hold on to? If I could, I'd just disappear into the wind. I used to write, to dream, to hope.
If there's a next life, I don't want to come back. The struggles of ordinary Chinese in 2025. If there's a next life, I don't want to come back. This life has already worn me out. These words echo the exhaustion of countless Chinese people in 2025 as they grapple with an economic downturn that has left them struggling to survive. From young graduates to middle-aged workers, from urban dreamers to rural elders, the weight of life's burdens is crushing. The glittering skyscrapers of China's cities stand in stark contrast to the silent suffering of its people, where survival has become the only goal for many. The crushing weight of life. The refrain, "too tired to live," reverberates through the hearts of many. For the young, the middle-aged, and the elderly alike, life in 2025 feels like an endless grind. The promise of a better future, once held up as the Chinese dream, now seems like a distant mirage. Hard work brings little reward, and the scars of a lifetime of struggle are etched deep. I've toiled my whole life slaving away, living like a parasite, only to end up with a lifetime of wounds, laments one voice online. The news is filled with stories that shake the soul, reports of economic decline, joblessness, and policies that seem to demand more from an already drained populace. They keep telling us to push harder, to pay more, to stimulate the economy. Another person writes bitterly, "But who can believe them anymore? No matter what they say, most people have lost faith." Earning a living in 2025 is no easy feat. For the average person, making ends meet feels like climbing an insurmountable mountain. It's harder to make money now than ever before. One-man shares. Those who manage to hold on to a modest job earning a few thousand yuan a month consider themselves lucky. But even that small stability is fleeting in a society where economic pressures are relentless. Where the blame lies. The role of the state in a nation's unraveling.
Coming into this society has worn me out. There's no way to step back, no room to retreat. Who's afraid I'll run away? If you don't want to deal with me, you don't even care about me anymore. Even the neighbors are meddling in my business. How long are you going to stick around? So long, too long. I see you retired, but that's not going to kill me. You're one tough old man, aren't you? I've crawled back, trying to escape for good. Family, oh family, I'm shouting, but no one hears my complaints. They come at me softly, but it's like a knife to help me out. You think it's easy for you? Coming into this society has worn me out. You're eating alone, stuffing your face, while I'm sipping some booze. You don't even want to eat, do you?
To understand the true scale of China's current crisis, one must look beyond the bridges and the faces sleeping beneath them. What's unfolding is not merely an economic downturn or a demographic hiccup. It is a failure of governance, a betrayal of promises made by the party state to its people over the past 4 decades. A system that once prided itself on delivering prosperity through authoritarian stability is now grappling with the bitter reality that its foundational model is cracking, not just at the economic margins, but at its very political core. The collapse of dreams of middle-class ascension, of home ownership, of stable employment, is not a natural disaster. It did not strike like a typhoon, unbidden and uncontrollable. It was man-made. It was manufactured through decisions, some deliberate, others negligent, that prioritized image over substance, control over flexibility, and ideology over adaptation. A graduate's broken dreams. Take Xiao Li, a Zeros-born graduate from a modest university in Jiangxi, who studied engineering with hopes of building a bright future. In 2024, he arrived in Guangzhou full of ambition, believing the bustling metropolis would offer him opportunities. But after more than a month, countless job applications, and endless rejections, he found himself penniless. "I haven't eaten in a day and a night," he says, his voice trembling. "I don't even have money for the bus." Xiao Li now questions whether leaving his hometown was a mistake. "If I'd stayed in Jiangxi, at least I could have eaten." Xiaoli's story is not unique. Across China, millions of young graduates face the same harsh reality. In 2025, over 12 million college students are expected to graduate, but the shrinking job market offers little hope. Factories, delivery services, and ride-hailing apps have become the default for many young people who once dreamed of white-collar careers. "I thought my degree would open doors," Xiaoli says. "Now I'm just trying to survive." Another graduate, Xiao Zhang, majored in film and media, dreaming of becoming a director or editor. He moved to Chongqing hoping to make his mark in the industry. Instead, he scrapes by on odd jobs and small video projects, earning a few dozen yuan at a time. "I learned every piece of equipment and editing software thinking I'd make it big," he says. "But now I can barely afford rent." His occasional gigs are not enough to cover the cost of living, and the future looks bleaker with each passing day. The mirage of stability. For decades, the Chinese Communist Party presented its rule as a social contract. In exchange for political obedience, citizens would be granted stability and material improvement. That compact held for a time. Incomes rose, megacities sprawled, and consumption became the engine of economic growth. But the party's unrelenting pursuit of GDP growth, often at the cost of long-term sustainability, created a facade rather than a foundation. When the 2008 global financial crisis rocked the West, China doubled down on infrastructure investment and real estate as its response. The result was unprecedented debt accumulation, wasteful construction, and the creation of economic bubbles with no underlying productivity. Ghost cities, half-filled high-rises, redundant expressways, these were not anomalies, but features of a growth model that had long stopped serving the public good. Yet through state media and data manipulation, the illusion of prosperity endured. Numbers were padded, headlines were scripted, officials rushed to meet arbitrary development quotas, knowing that political advancement depended more on meeting targets than ensuring actual welfare. It was a machine running on vanity metrics, and the people under the bridges are its discarded byproducts. Systemic denial and manufactured silence. As the economy cooled in the early 2020s, voices began to warn of structural imbalance, over-leveraged real estate, declining fertility, youth unemployment, and collapsing private enterprise. Yet the official response was predictable: deny, deflect, and suppress. Youth unemployment figures were quietly suspended in mid-2023, just as the problem reached historic highs. Censorship tightened. State-affiliated influencers flooded social platforms with curated positivity. Lying flat. Tangping, a protest by inaction adopted by disillusioned youth, was demonized in official commentary as unpatriotic and lazy. But no meaningful policy change followed. No safety nets were introduced. No honest reckoning occurred. In fact, the central government's insistence on micromanagement, combined with a distrust of local initiative, meant that even well-meaning municipal efforts were often stalled or overridden. Local governments, meanwhile, were drowning in debt and unable to fund essential services, let alone launch rescue efforts for their unemployed and unhoused constituents. The political cost of admitting failure became too high. So silence reigned. Tragedy was made invisible, and those who dared to document it, journalists, whistleblowers, even ordinary citizens with a phone, faced harassment, arrest, or worse. Middle-aged despair. No place for the old. If young people are struggling to start their lives, middle-aged workers are fighting to hold on to theirs. Layoffs have swept through industries, leaving many in their 40s and 50s, jobless and directionless. Old Wang, 45, worked in a Shenzhen electronics factory for over a decade until early 2025, when his company downsized due to falling orders. Now unemployed, he roams the city searching for work, but finds that even basic factory jobs demand workers under 35. "Who wants a 45-year-old with no skills?" he asks, his voice heavy with defeat. Old Wang's savings are gone, and he's resorted to picking up scraps to survive. He tried delivering food, but the grueling hours and physical demands were too much. I have loans for my house, my car, my appliances, everything, he says. I thought I was middle class, but now I'm barely hanging on. His story is a stark reminder of how fragile the so-called middle-class dream has become. Online similar voices echo old Wang's despair. Earning money is harder than climbing to heaven, one user posts. I have loans for everything: house, car, phone, computer. I wish I'd never left my hometown to work in the city. At least I could have grown my own food. The relentless pressure of debt and the lack of social safety nets leave many feeling trapped with no way out. An economy in decline. A society in crisis. China's economy in 2025 is a shadow of its former self. Factories are closing, businesses are shuttering, and unemployment is rampant. Official reports claim a 5.3% GDP growth in the first half of the year, but the reality on the ground tells a different story. Everything's growing, they say: agriculture, industry, services, exports. One netizen scoffs. But where's the growth in our lives? Why is it harder to buy groceries? Supermarkets stand empty, small shops are closing one after another, and even food delivery orders are dwindling. My store used to make thousands of yuan a day, a shop owner says. Now I'm lucky to make a few hundred. The purchasing power of ordinary people has plummeted, and the once vibrant consumer market is now a ghost of its former self. Social tensions are rising as frustration grows. Many blame systemic issues, pointing to corruption and policy failures as the root of the crisis. One anonymous user, calling themselves Central Plains Rainbow, writes on an overseas platform, "The market in mainland China is desolate. People can barely survive, and it's all because of the corruption of the evil Communist Party. I declare my withdrawal from the young pioneers." Such statements are becoming more common as people disillusioned by official narratives turn to the internet to voice their anger. The harsh reality of the underclass. Beneath the towering skyscrapers, the stories of the underclass are heartbreaking. In Chongqing, a young woman named Tingya, a film graduate, struggles to survive. She takes on odd jobs and small video projects, barely earning enough to cover her expenses. "I thought I could make it in a big city," she says. "But now I'm just trying to avoid starvation." Her careful savings of a few dozen yuan from each gig are all she has to fall back on, with no certainty about tomorrow. In construction sites, workers like Xiao Zhao carry 200-pound sacks of sand for a mere 10 yuan per trip. "It's backbreaking work," he says, "but if I don't do it, I don't eat." In rural areas, elderly residents survive on pensions as low as 100 yuan a month, barely enough to buy a few meals in today's economy. "What can 100 yuan buy?" an elderly man asks. "It's not even enough to eat properly." The cost of living is suffocating. From education to healthcare, housing to transportation, every aspect of life comes with a fee. "You pay to live, you pay to die," one person quips bitterly. Rent, utilities, property management fees, medical bills, and even funeral costs pile up, leaving many families drowning in debt. "We're charged for everything," a netizen writes. Even watching TV requires a subscription fee. The vanishing promise of education. For many, education was supposed to be the path to a better life. Parents in rural areas sacrificed everything to send their children to university, believing a degree would guarantee a good job. But the reality is far different. "I studied for 4 years dreaming of a white-collar life," says Xiaoli. "Now I'm delivering food for a living." The oversupply of graduates and the shrinking job market have turned degrees into little more than paper. Factories once seen as the domain of unskilled workers are now filled with university graduates. A factory manager in Foshan notes that 40% of their workers are college-educated. "People used to say 3,000 yuan couldn't hire a migrant worker," he says. "Now it's hiring graduates." The irony is bitter. The same parents who toiled in fields to fund their children's education now see them working alongside migrant workers in factories. A glimmer of hope. Amid despair, faced with such challenges, some choose to leave. Many return to their hometowns while others dream of escaping abroad. I just want to survive, one young man says, his voice heavy with exhaustion. Yet in the face of despair, there are those who refuse to give up. Some young people are learning new skills like coding or design, hoping to break into emerging industries. Others try entrepreneurship despite the odds. I know it's tough, but I believe if I keep going, I'll find a way, says a young factory worker. This resilience, however small, is a testament to the human spirit in the face of overwhelming odds, from mass mobilization to mass abandonment. What's especially tragic is the contrast between the party's past ability to mobilize resources and its present-day paralysis. This is the same system that built entire cities in months, that lifted hundreds of millions out of poverty, that launched a space program, and built the world's largest high-speed rail network. And yet now, as a generation falls into despair, that same system offers no response. Why? Because the incentives have changed. Today's China is not the same as reform-era China. The earlier model shaped under Deng Xiaoping's pragmatism was one of cautious decentralization, experimental policy zones, and technocratic flexibility. But under the current regime, power has been re-centralized. Loyalty has trumped competence, and ideological conformity has replaced creative policymaking. Local officials are afraid to act without central approval. Ministers prioritize slogans over substance. Entire policy sectors, education, health, industry, operate under the shadow of political correctness. This climate of fear and inertia is antithetical to any serious reform. Moreover, the very tools that once enabled China's rise, top-down control state capitalism, coercive social management, are now inhibiting its ability to cope with complex interconnected crises. The machine that built bridges can't rescue the people living under them. No room for the individual. The party has always viewed the population as a collective, a mass to be managed, not individuals to be served. In this worldview, policy is not designed to ensure personal dignity, but to maintain social harmony and control. That's why the suffering of individuals unemployed, graduates, bankrupted entrepreneurs, homeless families, is considered an acceptable cost of macroeconomic adjustment. But in today's China, the cost is no longer acceptable. It's unbearable. Millions of lives are being dislocated. A generation is losing faith not just in the system, but in the very idea of effort, of achievement, of meaning. This is not merely a crisis of income or opportunity, it is a crisis of identity. One cannot underestimate the psychological toll. Depression, anxiety, and suicide rates are surging even as public health systems remain underfunded and inaccessible. Social mobility, the dream that drove millions to sacrifice comfort for education, is in freefall. What remains is resentment, mistrust, and a creeping nihilism. The absence of accountability. One of the defining features of this crisis is the complete absence of accountability. In democratic systems, governments that mismanage are voted out. Ministers resign. Investigations occur. Even in flawed democracies, the ritual of responsibility exists. In China, by contrast, failure is institutionalized and rewarded. Officials who oversaw real estate collapses are promoted elsewhere. Those who mismanaged COVID lockdowns remain in power. Bureaucrats who failed to prevent local banking scandals receive party commendations. There is no mechanism, legal, political, or moral, by which wrongdoers are removed or held to account. This breeds impunity, and impunity breeds repetition. Without accountability, the same mistakes are made again, only on a larger, more devastating scale. The erosion of trust. What's at stake is not just policy or economy. It is trust. Trust in the system, in its fairness, its competence, its care. And that trust has been decimated. Once lost, trust is not easily rebuilt. No amount of propaganda can undo lived experience. A young man who spends a winter under a bridge will never again believe in official promises. A mother whose child is denied health care due to local corruption will never forget. A worker unpaid for months will carry that betrayal for life. This erosion of trust has consequences. It makes citizens cynical, disengaged, and ultimately disloyal, not in the sense of treason, but in the deeper sense of emotional divorce. They no longer feel this is their country, that it is their system. They go through the motions, but they no longer believe. What could have been done? Some will argue that this collapse was inevitable, that no country can avoid downturns, that all growth comes at a price. But this is misleading. China had options. It had resources. It had time. What it lacked was courage. Courage to admit mistakes. Courage to decentralize. Courage to redistribute wealth. Courage to prioritize people over prestige. It could have introduced universal unemployment insurance. It could have imposed taxes on speculation and offered rent subsidies. It could have allowed greater freedom for civil society, for the press, for citizen innovation. It could have pivoted toward a more sustainable, equitable growth model. But it didn't. And that was a choice.